Well, hello to you all once again, and thanks for retuning to your number one and favourite classic dirt bike TV channel, and thanks once again for all your recent comments you've been leaving on my video postings, and more especially to those Rob Hughes CTM bikes that I know you've been enjoying. So thanks to each and every one of you for your comments on those particular Rob Hughes videos. There will be, of course, many more bikes from Rob's collection coming up soon on my channel, so look out for that. Now, with regards subscribers, we're only, I think, a couple of hundred subscribers away from that 13,000 subscribers total, so thanks to each and every one of you, and also to the brand new subscribers who have recently signed up since my last video posting. Okay, coming up next, we're going to take a look at another bike that I came across while I was doing my paddock walkabout in the Westmoreland Golden Jubilee event in the summer of 2021. So this time round, we're going to take a look at Andrew Rudkin's lovely YZ Yamaha 250. Now, in the past, I have featured one or two of these iconic YZ250 Yamahas on my channel, and it's because they're such a popular choice of bike for vintage or evolution riders that you see so many of these going around, and this featured bike here belongs to Andrew Rudkin. Now, Andrew's particular YZ250 is another of the hundreds of bikes that I came across while I was walking through the paddock at the Westmoreland Golden Jubilee event back in the summer of 2021, and we still have many more of these bikes to feature from that event coming soon here on my channel. Now, I'm guessing again, but I'm pretty sure that Andrew's bike here is a 1980 250G YZ250 model, and as far as iconic race bikes go from the early 1980s, these YZs were probably about the best that you could buy in that year because they had a good chassis, they had very sharp handling and excellent suspension on the front and rear, and of course the icing on this particular cake was that stonking YZ250 two-stroke Yamaha engine. Although even now in 2021 these YZs are still much sought after race bikes, and if you're selling one and it's in reasonably good original condition, then these YZs can certainly fetch good money. But if you put a good rider into the saddle of one of these 250s, you can almost guarantee that he'll be in the top 3 finishers at the end of the day, because I've seen Andrew racing this bike, and they both certainly live up to their name by being very quick on the racetrack. Now, of course, the heart of these YZ250s is this two-stroke reed valve motor, which, as I remember, had a 6-speed transmission and a standard wet multi-plate clutch. But these 250s were pretty awesome, to put it lightly, and they didn't give you much in the way of grunt at the bottom end, although when this engine got into its sweet spot, which was of course the mid-range, the motor just took off like a ballistic missile, and once that happened there weren't many other 250s that were going to catch it. Again, the fuel for this featured engine was fed through this steel petal reed valve block, and on the standard 1980 250 I think it would have been fed its fuel through a 38mm Mikuni carburetor, although I'm not too sure if this flat slide Mikuni unit of Andrew's was actually a factory fitting. Now, the motor also had an alloy barrel with a cast-in steel liner, and as I remember, a 2-ring piston. Now, I'm also sure that the exhaust port was repositioned on this 1980 model to accommodate the new single downtube frame. Now, I'm also sure the exhaust expansion chamber was a redesigned part for that year, and although it did have a reasonably small silencer at the back of the bike, some say that it was still pretty loud for such a small compact engine. Again, at the bike's front end, it had a pair of 38mm Kayaba units, which at the time gave the rider almost a full 12 inches of travel to play with, but by all accounts these Kayabas were pretty good right out of the box, although there was no scope to adjust them externally for rebound or dampening. But of course you could improve matters by experimenting with different weights of oil, or by adding or removing air through the Schrader valves on the top of each fork leg. And again, these old school drum brakes were your standard stoppers in that year, and this front drum did a decent enough job of slowing the bike down, but it's also said that the rear drum brake was quite poor because Yamaha had reduced the overall size of the rear hub for this new model, which they say affected the braking force that you could apply. Now, at the rear end of the bike we had Yamaha's well-proven monocross suspension system, which was of the non-linkage type design, but this alloy beam construction swing arm was pretty strong, and it was quite light as well, and for the early 1980s this quite radical looking rear suspension system was considered very high tech for its day, and although it wasn't 100% perfect, it was still capable of doing a good job of keeping the back end of the bike in check, even although some riders say it did tend to bounce and hop around on the bumpy racetracks. Now, as you're no doubt aware, the bike's rear monoshock was housed just under the fuel tank, and it was also used as part of the frame's backbone, and it ran from around the top of the frame's headstock straight down to that monocross alloy swing arm. Now you can see just how it was all laid out in this Yamaha diagram, where you can see the long monoshock suspension unit where it's fixed to the swing arm at the bottom, and where it would have been bolted onto the frame at the top. Now, the oil canister for the shock was then placed onto the front of the bike's frame, and they say that this was done purely to place it into the oncoming cooling air and to try and reduce the shock suspension fade when it was worked hard on the very bumpy racetracks. And in this shot here you can see where the bike's rear shock bolts directly onto that alloy swing arm, and that's another reason that these YZs are normally eligible to race alongside twin shock bikes, because they don't have the more modern linkage type rear suspension systems, and of course they still have drum brakes and an air-cooled motor as well. But back in 1980, Yamaha had a full lineup of, I think it was 6 YZ models to choose from, right from the tiny little YZ250 right up to the superb YZ465, which is still regarded as one of Yamaha's greatest dirt bikes. Although overall these YZ250s were a pretty decent package for their day, and these yellow and black bikes were normally only really sold in the USA, and it was the white bikes with their red and black graphics on the tank that were normally associated with sales across Europe. But if you were looking for a bike to be the whole shot king at a race event, then maybe these YZ250s weren't super fast off the line, but once they hit that sweet spot of the mid-range, it was bye-bye competition and hello checkered flag. But these YZ monoshock Yamahas were still pretty quick bikes, and if you weren't paying attention, these YZs could certainly catch you out, because they did enjoy a wheelie now and again if you turned that gas on a bit quick on that fiery Yamaha motor. But when all things said and done, these are still a great machine if you want to get yourself into vintage or evolution racing, and this is still a great looking bike, this machine of Andrew's, and it's little wonder that these iconic race machines are still as popular today as they were in their golden years of the superb 1980s. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that quite brief clip of Andrew Rudkin's YZ250 Yamaha. As I said, just one of the hundreds of bikes that I came across at that Westmoreland Golden Jubilee Scramble at Penrith in the summer of 2021, and we will be taking a look at a few more of those bikes from the paddock at that event in future videos here on my channel. Okay, coming up next, we're going to take a look at this lovely pair of Suzuki RM250 slingshots. Now, this pair of lovely bikes belong to Scottish rider Robbie Allen, and I captured these bikes at a Scottish Twin Shock and Evolution event at Pow Mill during 2021. So we will be taking a look at Robbie's lovely RM Suzukis in my next video posting here on my channel. But of course, until then, everybody out there, continue to be safe and well until we all get back here together to talk about more vintage iron on your #1 and favourite classic dirt bike TV channel.